Yesterday, 2 days after Trump signed the Iran deal at a dinner table in Versailles, Israel killed at least 47 people in Lebanon in a single day. That makes it the second deadliest day of the entire conflict. The deal, on its 100th day, nearly collapsed before the ink had even cooled. A federal document confirms that local police across the country are being handed an app that scans faces against 250 million government records. And DHS's own paperwork admits American citizens will get swept into it without anyone checking citizenship first. And Europe is bracing for its second deadly heat wave in a month, with Paris facing a temperature above 40 degrees Celsius on a June day for the first time in recorded history. 3 stories, and the thread running through all of them is the same: documents and announcements that promise one thing, and a physical reality that delivers something else entirely. Let's start with Lebanon, because what happened yesterday is exactly the scenario I flagged less than 24 hours ago, and it arrived faster than even I expected. On Wednesday, Trump signed the U.S.-Iran memorandum at Versailles. Fighting had flared overnight. Hezbollah killed 4 Israeli soldiers in an attack on a tank. By Friday, Israel had responded with strikes across southern Lebanon that the Lebanese health ministry says killed at least 47 people, including 2 children, the second deadliest day of this entire conflict, surpassed only by April 17th, when 98 people died on the day a previous ceasefire was supposed to take effect. CNN's reporting captured the grim pattern directly. It's not the first time Israeli forces have released their most lethal salvos, as diplomats announced fresh ceasefire deals in Lebanon, highlighting the tenuous nature of such agreements. This isn't an aberration in the process, it is the process. Iran responded by suspending the talks that were supposed to begin in Switzerland. J.D. Vance's trip to Geneva got postponed, with the White House citing logistical issues, a framing that nobody covering this seriously believes. Officials told the AP and other outlets the real reason was straightforward. Iran pulled out because of the fighting in Lebanon. The MOU Trump signed explicitly declares the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Neither Israel nor Hezbollah were parties to that memorandum. Nobody got their signature, and 2 days after the document was signed at Versailles, the war it claims to end on all fronts produced one of its single deadliest days. By Friday afternoon, under pressure from Washington and Qatar, Israel and Hezbollah reached another renewed truce, set to take effect at 4 p.m. local time. The Times of Israel reported the obvious caveat: this ceasefire appeared as fragile as ever, because it does not require Israel to withdraw from the buffer zone it has established inside southern Lebanese territory. The same buffer zone Hezbollah has cited as its justification for continuing attacks on Israeli troops stationed there. A senior U.S. official said Washington had told Tehran that Israel agreed not to further escalate attacks, not to withdraw, not to dismantle the buffer zone, just not to escalate further. That is the level of commitment underwriting the ceasefire, holding the entire Geneva diplomatic track together. This is now day 100 of the broader Iran war, and the math is genuinely stark. The single deadliest day of the Lebanon conflict happened on a day a ceasefire was supposed to begin. The second deadliest day happened 2 days after the President of the United States signed a deal declaring the war over on every front. If you are looking for evidence that the document signed at Versailles has changed the physical reality on the ground in Lebanon, yesterday's death toll is the counter-evidence. The deal exists. The killing didn't pause for it. Now a story that received almost no coverage relative to how significant it is. NPR reported this week on a Department of Homeland Security document, first surfaced by the tech outlet 404 Media, describing a mobile facial recognition app being distributed to local police departments deputized to help enforce immigration law. Here's how it works, according to NPR's reporting. An officer photographs someone's face during a stop. The app runs that face against more than 250 million government records, State Department visa files, the same database TSA uses at airports, and other federal identity systems. The app then tells the officer whether that person can be detained for an immigration violation. The document itself, a privacy threshold analysis, essentially DHS's own internal assessment of whether a new tool's privacy risks warrant further study, contains the admission that should be the headline. It is conceivable that a photo taken by an ICE non-federal law enforcement officer using the TFM mobile application could be that of someone other than a removable individual, including U.S. citizens. DHS wrote that into its own paperwork. Before an officer scans your face, neither the officer nor the app knows your citizenship status. You get scanned first. The system sorts out who you actually are afterward. Every photo taken through the app is retained for 15 years. According to the document, meaning a local cop in a city you've never lived in can generate a federal biometric record of your face that persists for a decade and a half, regardless of whether you turn out to be a citizen, a permanent resident, or anyone with any legal status whatsoever to be exactly where you were standing. Jake Laperouk and other civil liberties researchers quoted in the coverage made the comparison that's hard to argue with. This is, functionally, the new form of papers, please. Except it doesn't require an officer to ask for documents at all. It requires nothing but your face and a phone app querying 250 million federal records in real time. Jeffrey Eddington, also cited in this reporting, put the legal exposure plainly. Citizens will get caught up in this surveillance. Not might, will. This arrives 1 week after NPR's separate reporting confirmed that ICE's own acting director had told Congress, in an April letter, that the agency gives itself wide latitude to collect information on individuals suspected of potential violations of law, including people who interfere with ICE operations, and maintains records on people who were never arrested. DHS has repeatedly and specifically denied operating a database of protesters. What DHS's own documents confirm, in writing week after week, is a set of systems that functionally produce exactly what a protester database would produce, distributed not through one central system the agency has to publicly own, but through a patchwork of local police departments running an app the federal government built and handed them. The denial survives because the architecture is decentralized. The surveillance doesn't require centralization to function. It only requires 250 million records, a smartphone, and 15 years of storage. And now, the third story, which doesn't involve a single decision anyone made, only the decisions nobody made fast enough. Western Europe is bracing for its second major heatwave in less than a month. Forecasters are warning that temperatures in the Paris region could exceed 40 degrees Celsius for the first time ever recorded on a June day in the French capital. More than half of France's population is expected to experience scorching heat in the coming days. Spain's National Weather Service has placed Seville, Zaragoza, and Cordoba under warnings for temperatures approaching 40 degrees, with tropical nights, when temperatures don't drop below 20 degrees Celsius even after sunset, offering residents no overnight relief. Portugal's meteorologists expect temperatures climbing from today through the following week, potentially exceeding 40 degrees in parts of the country. This is the second such event since late May. According to Wikipedia's running record of the 2026 European heatwaves, the first wave, which began May 22nd and peaked at 40.3 degrees Celsius in Mora, Portugal on May 27th, already killed 11 people and broke all-time temperature records for May and springtime generally across Spain, the UK, Germany, France, and Ireland. National average temperatures in France hit 24.9 degrees Celsius on May 26th, the hottest May day on record, 81 degrees above the historical 1991-2020 baseline. Here's what should concern you more than the temperature numbers themselves. The infrastructure built to handle European summers is failing under loads that, 20 years ago, would have been considered freak events, and are now arriving twice in a single month. Indexbox's reporting on this week's forecast confirmed that Turin in northwestern Italy suffered major blackouts last month, and the May heatwave strained its electrical grid purely from air conditioning demand. France's Transilien commuter rail network is warning passengers of possible heat-related disruptions because much of its infrastructure relies on thermal limits set in the late 20th century. Limits that simply did not anticipate the temperatures now arriving routinely in early summer. Schools across multiple countries are contemplating shifting exam schedules, specifically because tropical nights are disrupting students' sleep badly enough to affect testing. None of this is a surprise to climate scientists, who have been telling governments for 2 decades that exactly this kind of compounding, accelerating heat event was the expected outcome of continued emissions. What's notable now isn't the prediction being correct. It's the gap between the prediction being correct and the infrastructure being updated to handle it. A rail system built on 20th century thermal assumptions, a power grid in Turin that buckles under air conditioning load, school exam calendars only now being reconsidered. These are not failures of foresight. The foresight existed. What didn't happen was the multi-decade infrastructure investment that foresight should have triggered. Europe is now experiencing, in real time, the cost of having had the correct forecast and an inadequate response to it. 3 stories on day 100 of the Iran war. A peace deal signed at Versailles that didn't stop the second deadliest day of fighting in Lebanon's parallel conflict, less than 48 hours later. A facial recognition system, whose own federal paperwork admits it will scan American citizens before anyone checks who they actually are. Retained for 15 years, distributed specifically because a centralized system would be easier to deny. And a European heat crisis that scientists predicted decades ago, arriving on schedule into infrastructure that wasn't built fast enough to meet it. In each case, the document, the announcement, the forecast, all of it existed in advance of the consequence. The gap wasn't a failure of warning. It was a failure of response to a warning that was correct all along. That gap is the story this entire month has been about. Today, on the 100th day of a war that was supposed to be resolved, it's still the only story that matters.